Thurston from Wrestlenomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line. I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates, plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
And that warm applause welcomes us into another edition of Pollock and Thurston here on Wednesday, December the 6th. I am John Pollock, joined from the B-town of Buffalo, New York. What level is Buffalo, Brandon, as we will be discussing throughout the discussion? I think you're no lower than a B-level town.
I have some maps ready here today.
Buffalo, I can't wait for this.
Buffalo is, Buffalo's a B. It's a B county. Yeah, it's a B county. I can't tell you what Toronto is. Does Canada have counties?
No, not really.
You don't do counties. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So in the political realm, there's gerrymandering. Here in professional wrestling, we have a different way that the map is divided, and maybe Mark Shapiro is going to give us a little more color, as they say, in regards to how they distinguish what towns they're going to be visiting. But that is all to come. We're going to be catching up on all the latest news, and first time maybe we're going to have a doctor on the show. Is that accurate, Brandon?
I think so. I don't think we've been visited yet on this program by someone who has a PhD.
We are going to be joined by Kris Ealy of the NWA podcast. He has done a lot of work both for Post Wrestling and Wrestlenomics. He is going to be chatting with us a little later on. Do you want to give a bit of a teaser, Brandon, for those that have not seen some of your analysis that we'll be talking about with Kris? You have done some great breakdowns that we're going to make sense of.
Well, Wrestlenomics has obtained race demographic data, income data, and education data for all of the wrestling programs that are on U.S. television. All of the WWE programs, all three of them, all three AEW shows, Impact, New Japan, and WOW. So we have data for that. The one on race demographics is free at Wrestlenomics.com for everyone, and the one on income and education is for subscribers.
Okay, so we're going to be going through all of those charts and what they reflect about the pro wrestling industry, and then breaking them down by promotion as well, what we can glean from these numbers. Also, if you would like to get a super chat in, you are welcome to do so throughout the show, and we will make sure to get to all of your questions if you have any for myself, Brandon, or Kris a little later on, as he will be with us for the back half of the show. But we are going to the big three letters this week in pro wrestling media. I'm talking about UBS, as they had their media conference this week. And Brandon, this is great stuff for engagement, is it not?
Well, he had a lot of comments, and I think the biggest story in terms of fan engagement, what was the notion that he wants to cut on house shows. Mark Shapiro, he's the COO. I think he has dual titles, right? He's the
president and COO.
And COO. I think he has the same titles for both Endeavor and TKO. Anyway, he was not accompanied by Ari Emanuel, who he is sometimes accompanied by for appearances like this, but he wants to cut house shows. And there's some talk about Raw rights as well.
When you listened to this for the first time, what did you think was going to be the biggest takeaway from this? Because this is a 30-minute conversation that he had. There was a lot of news packed into this if you're looking for some insight into the post-merger plans that are in the immediate future for them. But did the house show strike you as, okay, this is going to be the big takeaway people have of this conversation?
When I listened to it, I think so, in terms of what fans would be interested in terms of how fans' experiences are going to be changed, I mean, it's one thing to think about whether Raw is going to get more money or less money, and whether it's on a different network is a big deal. But in terms of whether people who live in the dreaded C counties or D counties are going to continue to have house shows, that will affect their fan experience. So, but I didn't expect big news to be broken here. I guess, we've had reports and rumors that Raw is close to finalizing a deal. I don't know. I don't have any sense whether that's true myself, but
he gave us a big window that it could be closed tomorrow or next summer, whatever works anytime for the broadcasters out there. We can go before the NBA, after the NBA, get your checkbook in order. We'll do whatever you want. We're flexible. We're creative. Do whatever you need with Raw. We're here.
Literally the night before their current deal expires, he said. He said that literally
September 30th, 2024. Mark it on your calendar. Mark Shapiro's going to sit down and he's just going to pick up the phone and highest bidder gets Raw. That's how it sounds like. So don't be worrying about all this stuff now. But why don't you take us in the direction you want to go? Because we have isolated some quotes so we can hear Mark Shapiro in context and then we can respond in kind, because there was a lot packed into this chat on Monday.
Sure. So we'll play first a clip where he talks about house shows, and then towards the end, he's also talking about your favorite thing, more UFC fight nights coming up.
WWE, just as an example, though, let's remember they have over 300 events a year with 170 televised. So there's probably, while all those other fights, there's a reason to have them, those cards, those superstar events on WWE. While there's a reason to have them because it's good for the brand, we're building audience, we're putting them on in C&D counties. So we're really stretching the brand, and we're kind of amassing a greater array of eyeballs from all demos. So it's good for our long-term growth. From a margin perspective, they are dilutive. So there's probably an opportunity as we go through our efficiencies and our synergy opportunities to cut back on some of those non-televised events, which of course will push our margin up. On the UFC side, we continue to see the same opportunities and an opportunity to add more fights beyond the Dana White Contender Series, to your point, beyond the pay-per-views, beyond the 42. Not just waiting for when we go to market. There's an opportunity in our ESPN deal right now to add more cards, and we're exploring that right now.
I was just stating the other day, there's not enough MMA events out there. There's not enough UFC. I mean, once a weekend is just not enough for people that need more. So Mark Shapiro, thankfully, is addressing this scarcity in the marketplace for the UFC. But yes, C&D counties, dilutive to the margins, Brandon, something we cannot have. So, I mean, this is not something new. This is kind of the strategy that they took a number of years ago, was in cutting down the lesser performing house shows. Although coming at a time when, WWE live events are generally, are doing, pretty good business by this stretch, but they're obviously looking at the cost involved and is it worth running a town that is going to draw us 3,500 versus, the cost of putting these talents on the road and what is largely a television rights business and keeping up these house shows, which I can see the Endeavor side looking at this and maybe not seeing a whole lot of value in these house shows.
Yeah, first, I just noticed a lot of euphemisms there that I was really impressed with. Dilutive to the margins, which is just a way to cover your words. So I think it just makes it harder for lay people to understand. You're talking about unprofitable, in this case, house shows. He accidentally called WWE events fights and cards. No, they are superstar events. Sounds like he's been talking to Vince McMahon. But yeah, like you said,
this is the new. This is the new Carney that the investment community all speaks in, their coded language that we can't just flat out state what we are trying to mean.
Yeah, but live events is a pretty small portion of the business. So for people watching in video, I broke out the last 12 months from July 1st of last year to June 30th of this year before things get sort of complicated with the merger timing. But it should give some visualization into how much of this business now, in WWE's case, is media. And when we say media in this context, we just really mean some form of video, especially live broadcasts, which are Raw, SmackDown, even NXT, whether or not it's taped, the PLEs. But what was once a live events business and is built around this nomenclature of sell tickets and put butts in seats, it's become a pretty small portion of the business, and it's pretty true for AEW as well. And his perspective is, why are we in the live events business to this extent still when you're doing house shows and there's no media revenue being driven against them? When you're taping Raw, there is. When you're taping SmackDown, there is. When you're taping a premium live event, there is. But when you're just selling tickets, and they must have the numbers to show that these individual cases of smaller market towns, those aren't profitable. So that's apparently what he's pushing for there. And him and Ari are the boss, so it's up to them. Yeah,
I spoke with someone at WWE today who was just kind of conveying the two sides of the coin on reducing live events, and this person's kind of the two sides were that on the one hand they utilize a lot of freelancers for these shows. So those are people very much that need the more shows, the better. That there would likely be,
We're talking about stagehands and things like that.
Things like that as well. Of course, there's also like the argument, especially at the NXT level, of a value of live events that can't be seen in profits and losses. The other side of it is talent that looks at this, that this is a very small area of the WWE's business. Is it worth the wear and tear that we're putting on our bodies, being away from home? And that seems to be a generational shift, that there is certainly going to be those talents that they want to be on the road, live that lifestyle. But there's quite a lot of them that I think do value time at home and having a semblance of a normal life that is not just constantly living out of a suitcase, being on the road, going to the next town. And you have seen that reduction in the schedule that I'm sure many have gotten used to and realized this is a much better balanced WWE schedule than of even 10 years ago.
Yeah, I was looking at the numbers today. I think it's around 200 main roster events that they do. Obviously, they're still doing those really small NXT shows in Florida that are house shows for the purpose of getting people experience. But when people talk about whether or not the live events business is worth it, and one of the first things that people bring up is, well, with the venue merch, does it make it worth it? And the answer is probably not. But there are other values like marketing. You could say that even if you lose money on a given house show, you're still creating memories for people and building fandom by having people actually be there in person. And as you mentioned, you're getting wrestlers experience, especially the less experienced wrestlers who really need the experience. You're getting the reps in for them. So there are values there. Whether or not it's worth whatever they're losing. And again, we don't know exactly what they're losing. There were quarters, especially pre-pandemic. I don't think there were any yet post-pandemic, especially now since ticket sales have improved. And they are running a lighter load than they have pre-pandemic. But there were whole quarters pre-pandemic, where their live events division was unprofitable. It lost money. It lost maybe $1 million or several $100,000. So it was dilutive to the margins on the whole, in terms of how they do their accounting.
So yes, we will look, and this had come out a number of years ago, whenever there was that kind of like annual lawsuit that WWE would go through of, inauthentic merchandise that was out there. And there was one year, I remember we got the breakdown of like what classification each city is, like your A towns, your B towns. I think it went down through like C level, but you did literally have the ranking of what cities are. And I'm sure most people that follow like attendance figures can figure out what are, sort of the range of where they are.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a formal standard categorization for this A, B, C, D. But I do have some Nielsen data that categorize them that way. And again, I don't know what exactly the criteria is here, but I'm guessing it's like quartiles of population. But I put what we have here for people watching videos. Here we have a map of the U.S., and I've marked in these light blue circles. This is where every WWE event has happened, and it's bigger circles if there's been more than one event in this year, 2023. And we've got it's sort of color coded, so you can see that most of the events that they do are in A or B towns. I was looking at least in the U.S., right? We don't know. You don't even do counties in Canada, but there's about at least 23 house shows that I could find that they did or are going to do this year that were in C or D counties, so would theoretically be on the cut list in future tours.
All right, let's keep it moving then, and because there's a lot to explore here with one Mark Shapiro. What is up next, Brandon?
Sure. We have he was talking about production cuts, and as we know, there were some W layoffs, and TKO foresees $50 to $100 million of annual savings as a result of the merger. And Mark Shapiro has some experience in production.
Frankly, I think there's a lot more. I know there's a lot more, just from a production standpoint. Just think of how many events we televise, we put on, we bring the show on the road, we bring trucks out to different cities, whether it's the cloud or it's cameras or it's tape machines, replay, graphics, operators, stuff we can do AI back at our headquarters in either Vegas for UFC or our Stanford production facility for the WWE. There are a lot of production efficiencies. Even if our production chiefs want to tell me there's not, frankly, I worked at ESPN for 12 years. I oversaw all production. I've been through all the song and dance with every producer who, treats every tape machine and camera like it's a baby and doesn't want to give it up. And we're here to improve our margins.
That was a Merry Christmas from Mark Shapiro to all of the production staff out there. And I would love to be a fly on the wall for a sit-down discussion between Mark Shapiro and Kevin Dunn, potentially. But yes, Mark Shapiro, if you've been following the actors and writers strike and this huge fight over AI, here's what a situation looks like where, we can replace a lot of these humans with technology, and it would definitely help our margins. And
he mentioned AI, and I think not in that clip, but he did mention AI around this subject. Yeah.
So it would seem that, the idea that they are done with their cost cutting, hardly the case. And it would seem like production, you would imagine that there is a lot of redundancy there between WWE and UFC when you're looking at the different departments and crossover. But I mean, in all of these things, you hear from a Mark Shapiro that the number one target is reducing as many costs as possible as assigned to Wall Street. But you also have areas of the company that would be, let us not compromise our quality to such a degree either. That's sort of the balance of a merger of what you're going through here. But typically it's the cost cutting that wins out.
Yeah. And he mentioned the production facilities, right? So UFC has a production facility. Is that the Apex in Las Vegas?
Yes, that's where they run all of their production out of.
And they do have a production facility in Stamford, which is like a separate building down the street from the main headquarters. I don't know. They certainly not recently have they run any in-ring events there. They do have the PC, but something in sort of related to the live events issue is that maybe they would do a residency or some sort of permanent live event, maybe even in like a theme park or something like that, as we've seen, WCW through the years do Universal Studios and things like that. Like I wonder if that's not something that they're thinking about. And I think this is a point that Chris Zellner had brought up like over a year ago about, maybe that's in place of house shows. And because most of the expense comes from the travel, the loading in and the loading out. But if you're just fixed in one position, then you save a lot of expense that way. So I think maybe that's a possibility. And maybe, who knows, we'll have WWE events at the UFC Apex eventually someday.
Can we get AI ring technicians that can put the ring up and get to that point, put everyone's pertinent information on a cloud, just
robotics.
One person sent to the building and it's just turnkey. That could be the goal of where we get to.
Eventually, when AI is good enough, we'll have robotics. That will be the next big investment.
What could go wrong? All right, the next clip from Mr. Shapiro.
Sure, and then we have site fees,
yes,
where we get numbers listed off one by one.
This is what I thought was going to be
a deal in Australia with the government there for $16 million to bring really a combination of events to Australia. As you know, we did a deal for roughly $20 million to bring a fight card. Again, just a fight night, not a championship pay-per-view night, just a fight night for $20 million to Saudi Arabia. We get roughly $25 million every time we do an event in Abu Dhabi, just site fees. And WWE is getting over $100 million for the two events they do in Saudi Arabia every year.
So before Mr. Shapiro rudely cut me off, that's what I thought was going to be the big takeaway from this was some of these actual figures, more so on the MMA end, that I have never seen these disclosed before of this amount. Abu Dhabi, they've been running for years, and you can see why it is such a lucrative set of shows for them. But again, we just talked about this deal that reportedly Vince McMahon had a big hand in coordinating with the government in Saudi Arabia, but a $20 million amount that they are receiving for this fight night card that will be staged in March, below what a WWE event goes for. But again, this is a much more scaled down UFC event than a massive pay-per-view in comparison to a WWE show. And then $16 million in Australia for, quote, a combination of events. So we will see what that all entails, but it would certainly sound like this is not just limited to that Elimination Chamber show that's been announced for Perth.
Yeah, and there's no UFC events announced in Australia, is there?
No, not as of now, but you could imagine that this, I don't know if this would be concerning like a weekend of events or that this is, plotted throughout the first two quarters or something like that, that you would think a UFC event would be tied to at some point.
Because 16 for, I mean, ruling out the Saudi Arabia deal for WWE, 16 million for a site fee for just one WWE show would be many, many times larger than any other site fee that I know of. It would probably be bigger than what they're getting for WrestleMania, I would guess. I would guess that maybe that is a few million that they're getting for WrestleMania each year, but 16 would be obviously a lot more than that. And it'd be interesting to see if the fight night that they do in Saudi Arabia, that seems to be just a one event deal. That doesn't sound like a longer term deal. And maybe that's sort of a test run to see if they want to do a longer term deal like WWE has.
Yeah. And it was also later stated in the discussion on Monday about the idea of piggybacking these WWE and UFC shows that they have mentioned, but again, looking for the right site fee. Like if we're going to do this, we want to be paid handsomely for it. And I would imagine they are shopping this as a at minimum 2-event structure. You could always tack on a SmackDown or something like that and make it this giant weekend at a government of choice that is willing to spend these millions to bring both companies to their country.
Yep. And we know they're going to do Berlin, and we don't know if Berlin, the Brawl in Berlin they're going to do in September, if that's a site fee. It's a big enough market that maybe it's not. The show that they're doing in France almost certainly is. They're doing those two and Australia. But he mentioned, because the moderator asked him, how many markets do you really think there are for this? And I think, what did he say? 20 or 50, something in that range of I guess, what I'm guessing is mostly international locations that aren't such big cities, that they're already tourist destinations, but that would want a major event. I guess London, if they really want WrestleMania, might be an exception, with WrestleMania being such a big event.
And we will finish off with one more clip here from Mark Shapiro at the UBS conference.
Sure. And this is just him talking about the Raw deal timing.
We have time. We can be flexible. We can be patient. Our job is to maximize the rights value of Raw. And I would tell you at the same time, just remember that we do all the production. So we just feed. You kind of take it in and you air it or you charge for it. So we can literally wait till the night before if we want to decide where we're going to go in the next deal.
The night before. Just call up Mark Shapiro. So yes, the Raw rights will be up the end of the third quarter, 2024. And yeah, I mean, there's obviously the reports out there about Nick Khan and Paul Levesque recently going to LA, to the extent that Paul Levesque missed CM Punk's second night back with the company at Raw, and how far along this is or is not. You certainly got the sense with Mark Shapiro, it did not sound, based on his answer, that a deal is imminent. Like, it seems to be as though there's active talks, but I didn't get the impression that we should be expecting a press release to be dropping tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't take anything he says there as too definitive towards what's happening or not happening. But yeah, I mean, look, most of the offices, most of the people that they would want to talk to are probably in LA, for whether that's Disney, which FX seems like the likeliest place if they end up with Disney, Amazon Studios in LA. I suppose they could have just been meeting with TKO executives in LA. But yeah, everybody's there that they would need to talk to, except for maybe NBC. I think they're in Philadelphia, but maybe they have offices in LA as well.
How do you feel Mark Shapiro is in this role as one of the front-facing people of the company? I mean, he has a lot of media experience, having his role at ESPN as the head of programming. And I mean, do you get the sense that Mark Shapiro might be one of the more kind of public figures that's out there for TKO?
It's definitely going to be him and Ari from here on, right? Like, they're going to do these conference appearances that Nick used to do, that back in the day George Barry used to do. It's going to be them. It's going to be them on the earnings calls, apparently. It's not going to be any WWE people, any UFC people. It's going to be them. And I don't know. He sounds like a guy you know and you can talk to, but he also has lots of buzzwords in his pocket. I can say, around the context of the layoffs that happened last week at WWE, and kind of throwing the UFC and WWE production chiefs under the bus there, and like making it public that he's having disagreements with them. Apparently, that
was very noteworthy. Yeah.
He also kind of bragged about they wiped out the WWE analytics group and they're all doing it at Endeavor, according to him. So, things like that. I mean, from an employee perspective, it doesn't sound, it's not endearing to him as a leader, but he's clearly, good at speaking in these things.
Yes, and also made mention, of course, of the Endeavor flywheel that I think
Yes.
by contract they have to mention at least once in these discussions. As
Have
always,
they trademarked that yet?
Have to be loyal to the flywheel.
Yes.
Just want to talk about a few more things, and then we're going to bring in Kris Ealy. But AEW All-In ticket sales. We've got the latest figure from WrestleTix. So last week the pre-sale occurred, and then the public on sale was on Friday. So we've had just over a week since the pre-sale, and less than that for the public to have access to tickets. And WrestleTix reporting 36,332 tickets out thus far, with 9 months to go until this show, which I would say I'd be very happy with this number if I was AEW. If you had any hesitancy about, man, are we coming back too soon? What is the overall demand for a follow-up show? This would certainly suggest that there is a very strong amount of people who wanted to jump on tickets now. And I think that we'll see many more that are going to be more patient and wait till closer to the show, where that seems to be a growing trend of waiting for prices to come down.
Yeah, it's stronger than I would have predicted, based on just the vibes that are out there about AEW as a brand right now. You can look at what their attendance was last night for Collision in Montreal, where they did under 3,000 for the first time in the market. I know they're doing 2 shows there.
I would have been very disappointed with last night, even being Collision. And I know that Collision is more limited in terms of its access here in Canada, but regardless, it's AEW coming to Montreal. It's Kenny Omega in a match regardless. And I just thought their first time in Montreal, even when we combine tonight, which will be much, much stronger and has the bigger focus, I would say it was like, this was a market that I certainly thought could have staged a pay-per-view, and for the right card, I think could have been very high.
Yeah, WrestleTix has last night at 2,852. So they're taping Collision first in real time. That has happened, but it's not going to air until Saturday, and Dynamite will happen tonight.
Yeah, I would imagine that maybe the Bell Center wasn't available on Thursday or Friday, and they wanted to do back-to-back nights. That's my only thought of it, and they didn't want to tape Dynamite and then have 2 taped shows. That's my only thinking, because we have never seen something like this from Collision in its short history. But it's going to be very awkward that, I mean, they did do this significant injury angle on Collision. We won't get into spoilers for people out there because I'll hear it from everybody. But you have to kind of go now back in time with tonight's show that has to precede what is going to air on Saturday, and how you handle all of that. So
you think with Tony Khan being a WCW fan, maybe he would do some negative title reigns or something like that. But Dynamite is for tonight is at 4,457 as of the last count from WrestleTix. About 4,500. So better, but we're still under 5,000 here, and that's usually in the range of what Dynamite has done. But again, this is first time in the market for Montreal.
All right. Well, at this point, we're going to welcome in our guest. You have heard him on the NWA podcast, a staple on Post Wrestling, as well as a lot of his written contributions to Wrestlenomics. We are bringing in the doctor himself, Kris Ealy, who is here with us. How are you doing, Kris?
I couldn't get my headset to work right, so I'm just letting y'all know right now. If I sound bad, just feel free to
sound crystal clear, Kris.
Right,
just
awesome.
The way everyone wants to be hearing you. Any kind of thoughts just on some of the subject matter that we were just discussing from Mark Shapiro's chat earlier this week at the UBS conference, and how you felt this merger has gone down so far? Any kind of takeaways you've had this early into this marriage between the UFC and WWE?
The takeaway that I have from the merger is it's not Vince McMahon's company anymore. It's just in business psychology, it's called systems theory. It's just a big system with a bunch of littler systems in it, and this is just how they're gonna roll now. And I don't think the goals are exactly the same as they used to be, but I think they're in good shape, from just the infancy of this.
It's going to be very interesting, I would say, to see the the sort of, because typically when these deals go down, it's presented as, you know, this big celebratory moment. Oh, we're getting together. This is huge news. And it's usually awful news for the further you go down the totem pole, and you hear a comment like Mark Shapiro about, man, there's way more redundancies to be had.
Right. Yeah.
Citing the exact department. And that's always like, you definitely sense like a gigantic attitude and morale shift in the UFC when they were purchased back in 2016. Of like, they were still able to maintain this kind of like mom and pop shop feel, even though it was, you know, Dana White and the Fertittas were making gigantic amounts of money, but you had a much more kind of, it was, for many of the fighters, it was as though we were still in the struggle to get the UFC into the mainstream. And once they were sold for so much, that's when the fighter pay discussion really erupted. And you did see that big shift. And now we are like, we're part of this like corporation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's you're a part of a corporation now. It's not you're the way it used to be is not how it is anymore. And this is something that I've dealt with. I've been in the middle of these kind of deep cleanings where a company is bought by another company or taken over by another company, whatever the case is. People are going to get fired. Roles are going to change, and whatever the old boss promised to honor isn't always going to be the same once a new company buys. I think it's is going to just be a growing period for everyone, and you know everyone's going to find out where they fit in. I think relatively fast, I'd say within the next couple years or so.
So we're having Kris on to talk about these breakdowns that Brandon has put together through some data at the U.S. Census Bureau, which is a bookmark, I think, on every listener's.
So the data is from Nielsen because it's related to TV viewership, but I did compare it against the general population using U.S. Census data.
So where would you like to start, Brandon? You have several breakdowns here, including race, education, income breakdowns, and I think it's pretty noteworthy information here to just get a sense of like what the audience makeup is in present day.
Yeah, well, in terms of race, and this is something that we've looked at least two other times in the past, looking at TV viewership, and it's the case that AEW's TV shows don't have as many black viewers in terms of percentage as other wrestling programs do. So in the case of WWE programs, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, they're all at or over a quarter of the audience are black viewers. And that's roughly the case for Impact, New Japan, and WoW. WoW is actually the highest at 31%. But Dynamite especially, and that's their most watched show by a fair margin, Dynamite has the smallest percentage of black viewers at 16%. So that has continued to be the case. And if we look at this over time, there haven't been major changes here, at least in terms of Dynamite. It's been at about the same level since we started looking at this in 2021.
I'm not surprised by these numbers. I think AEW, they might start turning around in 2024 with Ricky Starks and Swerve being in more prominent positions. The WWE's numbers, they don't surprise me because it's kind of legacy television, so I expect it. But the thing with them is I just on our show we did last month, Brandon, we were looking at the merch numbers, your numbers and WWE's numbers, and there was no black talent on either list. So I think both companies right now, NXT is it's a little better, but it's like I don't know where black talent fits in those companies at the moment, especially with WWE currently. Because I'm not.
AEW was tuning in, Kris, and that led to Powerhouse Hobbs' new shirt, big, black, and jacked.
Yeah, I haven't seen that shirt yet. I'll give it a look. I'll buy it. And that's the thing too with the merch. It's got to be good merch that people want to buy. And the talent has to be over to a degree where people want to buy the merchandise. I like even like with the list that Brandon put out with the WWE talent. I'm not surprised by the list because there's nobody in WWE right now that's black whose merchandise I'd actually like. Just speaking of a fanboy, as a fanboy that just likes buying stuff, there's no one's merchandise right now there's no one on the roster right now where it's like, oh, I need to buy this person's shirt. Because I think a lot of this stuff is silly, you know. I don't understand what's going on with Lashley or the Street Profits. I don't know what the New Day's new role is. I guess it's just to be there and be a constant on television. But you know, it is what it is at this point. And the viewership is always gonna, it seems like to me, it's always going to be a reflection of like merchandise and all of that. AEW, at least with Collision, that's just not an appointment show for me to watch anymore. In the beginning it was, and now I kind of catch it. Even when I DVR it, I could go weeks without watching it. I sometimes like, if we're doing a show on that Sunday, I'll go back and watch a month's worth of Collisions and just fast forward through stuff just to get through it. And I think that I think it's easy to take an audience for granted and expect them to always be there. And I am not. I don't know what Tony Khan is doing as far as like catering to black audiences. If it's a priority to him, because anytime I hear him in the scrum call, he'll allude to it being important, but there's just, I don't know. There's so many things going on there. It's hard for me to just kind of, say exactly what it is.
In terms of like the audience composition of AEW, it's about a third female, the audience is, which is a little lower than what WWE has. So it's a whiter audience. It's a more male audience. And I always remember like when I was working indie shows, and I remember like, the handful of times where I worked like what people will call super indies. And I remember like having my match, and then after the show, watching some of the matches from the back of the building and looking around and being like, this looks like it's, overwhelmingly white men who are here. Is there some, and people think of AEW as this sort of more hardcore wrestling product. Like, is there something about that culture or that scene that just makes it not as accessible or welcoming to people who aren't white men?
Probably. I remember going to an ECW show when I was like 16 or 17, and the vibe there was, that's not a show you bring a date to. At
How
least
about the
in
Smoky Mountain shows you were going to?
Oh yeah, those were nuts, man.
Did you go to Smoky Mountain?
Yes, I did, because I lived in Knoxville in middle school, and we went to those shows. I went to a couple of those shows where New Jack cut some of the most racially charged
like the
promos.
O.J. Simpson stuff.
Yeah. It was nuts, man. He would always like, it would be me and my friend, John Duncan. His dad was a congressman in Knoxville, Tennessee, Republican congressman. We won't get into all that, but we would go to those shows, and he'd be like, he'd be like nice to me, and then he'll just crap on everybody in the audience and just say the most stuff. I'd seriously be afraid of something bad happening at that stuff. My mom didn't. She just saw it as silly ass wrestling, so she didn't really take care. But back to the original point. I don't know how welcoming of an environment that stuff is. I haven't really studied demographics like that as far as female viewership, but like just speaking as a man, I like AEW is a mixed bag. It's either I think that what they're having a hard time doing is capturing everybody. I think they're trying to serve every single demographic they can, and at the end of the day, they end up kind of making everybody upset. And I don't think it has to be this difficult to put women in prominent positions or put minorities in prominent positions. Like I think they kind of overthink things sometimes. Anytime I get a student that's like taking forever to take an exam, I always just explain to them, like, stop overthinking it, just get through it, right? And I think AEW is just really, really bad with like they overthinking it, or maybe not thinking about it enough. I'm not really sure.
How would you say that has changed for AEW? Let's say like an 18-month window, and do you feel like under indexing with a black audience, is it as simple as creating black stars, and how have they addressed that? And does it go further beyond that? Kind of what we're talking about is just like an overall kind of way you feel about a show. It goes beyond just the representation on the show, but also kind of the overall quality that you're trying to access this audience with.
That's a very good question, man. That's I don't know if it's a real, like, I can talk about this. The three of us can talk about this. I can be on the show with Nate and Ray and Andrew and talk about it. I don't know how simple it is to fix these issues with the black audience. I do believe that they do little things here and there, but something isn't connecting. I do think if you have one strong, excuse me, COVID cough, if you have one strong main eventer, it could help the black viewership overall. I really do believe that. I think losing Jade was a big blow to them, because I think they did, even though it was kind of they were slow to kind of get her into the main event scene. I think they were building her up to something, and now she's kind of in WWE, and we have no clue when she's going to debut. So I think that, like, AEW, I think if they made a big play for Mercedes Moné and signed her, that would be a step in the right direction. But I also believe that when you sign talent, you should have plans for them. And I think that's the problem with WWE with Jade at the moment. Because I was reading in the Observer, like, they signed her, and I guess they thought she wrestled one way, and when they got her, now they're like, we got to show her the WWE way. And it's, to me, it's like, this woman's been on television for 3 years, and now you're not satisfied with what you signed. So I don't know. I think with AEW, think they could fix this if they just if TK, just put his mind on it. He's got Will Washington working there right now. Hopefully he's talking to him. He's got good people working there. So hopefully they can figure this out. I still like AEW. I still watch AEW. I'm not really like both products. In this season of both products are just kind of chores for me to watch. The CM Punk going back to WWE, which we predicted on the NWA podcast, that's gotten me back kind of into it. I have these spurts where it's like, oh, this happened, let me watch and all that. But I do think if you have like black stars and you attach them to top talent, it could lift, but it can't just be anybody. It's got to be somebody that's, resonates with the audiences, right? Like I think if I had to pick one person, Swerve is having a moment, and I think AEW needs to run with him.
I also want to ask you, Brandon, because when I was going through like your breakdowns here, the one that really jumped out at me is like the true wonder of the pro wrestling ecosystem, and that is WoW Women of Wrestling. That is just this anomaly that, I mean, it has the largest percentage of black viewership here with 31%. And I mean, you could expect like a higher female skew, but like 41%. Like I look at these and yes, WoW is not doing like AEW level numbers, but they're doing a lot better than a lot of these other companies that we give a lot of attention to in Impact and like New Japan Pro Wrestling. I hear nothing ever in terms of feedback on WoW Women of Wrestling, but it has an audience, and I mean they have very like favorable breakdowns here when you're looking at these stats that they're attracting.
Yeah, we need to invite Jeannie Buss on, but it does have the largest percentage of black viewers, and I was looking at the census data. Black people are 14% of the population, so really all of these shows over-index relative to that, despite AEW having the smallest percentage of black viewers among all the other shows, and WoW does have the highest female viewership too.
How are those syndication numbers figured for WoW? Because I know out here on KCAL 9 is where WoW comes on. It's like every time it airs, does that count towards the ratings?
So I think we're looking only at first runs where it does around 300,000 viewers or mid 200,000 viewers every week. But yeah, it airs in 100% of the country on syndication on networks like CW, on your local affiliates. But it does larger viewership than Impact does on Access with smaller coverage, certainly. New Japan.
Oh, like 3 times what like an average Impact is doing like 100,000 viewers or so. Granted, like Access is in a lot less homes, but nonetheless, it's like within wrestling. I mean,
there have been weeks where it was more viewed than Rampage even.
Right. WoW's a very easy show to find out here. I don't watch it regularly, but it's not like Impact.
It's on Vice too. It's on cable on Vice.
Yeah, it's like it's like I've got WoW like on my DVR feed. It's recorded a bunch of times. Impact, they used to do this weird thing when I would record it where it would break it up, like each 30-minute block counted as an episode. I think they stopped doing that, but that made it very, very hard to watch for me. But yeah, WoW is I have to watch WoW to see what like actually, instead of glance at it, sit down and watch it to see why they're doing so well with black viewers, because that was something that I noticed also. I thought it was like an anomaly, so I just was like, but yeah, that is.
And some of it may just be related to who has access to what forms of media. With WoW being in syndication, but then you look at you would expect SmackDown to be benefited by that as well, but SmackDown is right on the same level as Raw and NXT basically, which are on cable, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's a case of you know, the CM Punk AJ Lee effect, you know, between both companies. I know AJ is not there anymore, but nonetheless, I just look at WoW. I was like, this is like this. There's an audience for it, and like these numbers would be very encouraging. The fact they have 100% coverage, that's something Ring of Honor could never achieve in all of its time, with Sinclair, no less.
Yeah, and we should probably point out too that the Hispanic viewership, at least in terms of percentage, is down for basically everybody over the course of the last 2 years. I don't know if that's just due to other people of other races coming in and increasing here, but it is a smaller percentage for basically every show than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it is. And like some of these are really, it's hard to sometimes read these, because sometimes I feel it's like the simplistic answer is, well, create acts that are specifically targeting a Latino audience. I don't think WWE could do much more than having a Rey Mysterio, to have an LWO that's pushed in a significant degree. You have an attachment to a Bad Bunny that swoops in every now and then. I think sometimes it's like there's not a one answer fits all for
right, because they've got
reach an audience.
Yeah, Punishment Martinez. What's
Damian Priest?
Sorry about that. Yeah, yeah. They've got him too. You know, they've got a lot of prominent featured Hispanic people on the show. So, you know, in
terms of some of the educational breakdown, Brandon, what were some of your findings? Any big takeaways from that area?
Well, so if you look at it, it's kind of complicated data to look at, but we have 4 different categories here that accounts for everybody. And that's either you have 1 to 3 years of high school. And by the way, this is not about who the viewer is, but what's the education level of your head of household. So we're not talking about who's in front of the TV. We're talking about the education level of whoever is the head of household. And it's either basically you had some high school, you have graduated from high school, you have some college, or you have 4 years of college. We might, for shorthand, say you have a bachelor's degree. And it's AEW that has the most people who have completed a bachelor's degree, basically, where it's all like a quarter of the audience. Their head of household has a 4-year degree in college or more. And the others are less. We've got a bunch of categories here, but it would look like AEW has the more educated audience. Probably still a little bit less so than the population in general. I looked for the general population stat on this, and I couldn't find something that was just about the head of household, but the next best thing I could find was people over the age of 25, and the percentage of that is, I think it's in the 30% range, something like that. But it's well above even what the best wrestling show is doing here.
How do you think this chart is going to be aggregated, Brandon?
I've not delved into the replies of this article being shared on Twitter. The other one is that we have to talk about too is median income. So which viewers have the most money? It's along the same lines. Yeah,
sure. A lot of nuanced headlines that'll come out of
right. This. And I think the education level kind of does speak to something, because in politics, in the United States of America, the more liberal you are, the more educated you are, the people tend to swing more liberal. And I think AEW being, a lot of people dub them the more progressive company, and their ratings. I think you're the one that told me this, Brandon. Like anytime there's like something on the news happening, it really hurts AEW's ratings. So I think they might need to I still wish I had knew the black people that were watching AEW, so I could kind of maybe have a more tailored answer. But yeah, I think they might, need to, I don't know, maybe because anytime they try to go WWE route, I never like that stuff. So,
well, these are very fascinating breakdowns, I think, when you're looking at this. And on the NXT side, we haven't talked about NXT too much. I mean, it's had gigantic growth over this past year, and they have the X factor of moving to the CW network next year, and in theory will be more accessible than on the USA network. I mean, they will be in a position where with SmackDown leaving Fox, I mean, NXT might be the most homes that a WWE program is available in.
It probably will be. One thing that I think people are wondering in context of this is the ad rates. I mean, certainly in terms of the ad revenue that any of these shows can drive is going to be overwhelmingly driven by the viewership. But in terms of cost per viewer, I do think that WWE shows, at least Raw and SmackDown, are probably driving a higher CPM than AEW shows do, despite AEW shows having the audience with a higher income and with a higher education level. I do think WWE still has the lead just when it comes to independent, ruling out the differences in viewership. I think WWE does have the advantage in terms of charging for ads. But if anybody in AEW wants to correct me, they can.
Yeah. For the longest time with the CW network too, we didn't get it on DirecTV out here because they always were fighting with the cable company. I think we just got it back maybe like a month or two ago, but for the longest time, the CW was blocked out on DirecTV. So,
well, before we wrap up with you, Kris, I did want to ask you a little bit. You mentioned the fact that like CM Punk has sort of brought you back into WWE with the interest level. He's going to be on SmackDown Friday and then on Monday for Raw as well. What have you thought just of the overall handling here? Because I did see some of your posts as well about sort of, this is a guy that really did not pay any like significant punishment for this. And, he's in a position where he is going to be in a prime spot and undoubtedly coming in with a gigantic contract on top of that into a company that is surging in popularity as well.
Yeah, he's failing upward. That's what we call that in politics. It always just never ceases to amaze me how wrestling fans will just say some very hyperbolic stuff like, oh, he'll never come back, or this is his last chance. I have no reason to believe that this is his last contract if things go awry. Like, I think he could last a good year or two. He signed a 3-year contract. I think the same exact crap can happen to him in WWE at the end of his contract, and he'll find his way back in AEW, feuding with, those elite guys. I think it says more about the way that wrestling infrastructure works. I mean, and then people were saying WWE doesn't really need him. Like, need is such a funny word, it's like I don't like people don't need to drive Lamborghinis and Rolls Royces and stuff, but people drive them, and I think with a guy like CM Punk, it's just I don't know how a guy like him learns a lesson. I don't know how anybody in wrestling that's a main eventer learns anything, from, if another company is there willing to hire him. If there was no WWE to hire him, maybe he would have learned a lesson. But there's always a company that's going to take somebody. Like the minute he became a free agent, the three of us on NWA, we were like, he's going to WWE. That is going to happen. And I was judging just by how the past has been. I mean, I've seen, a guy stab a guy with scissors and then the next year be in WWE, so it's, I think WWE's handled it well. I do think he's going to be on a short leash, as in the sense of, I think he's going to be willing to cooperate a little bit more. I don't think it's going to be a situation where WWE is just going to just give him bull crap and he's just going to be forced to have to accept it. I do think it's going to be a symbiotic relationship where both sides are going to kind of have to. And I don't think Triple H is going to purposely give this guy something that he just doesn't want to do. And once that stuff starts happening, his contract will probably be up. And I just don't see wrestlers of CM Punk status ever learning lessons, or ever, having to, if there's two companies, one company's going to want the other person. That's my take on that.
It is one, certain like benefit or deterrent, whatever you want to call it, when you have these two competing companies. Like star power is always going to win out, and that was the X factor here for a CM Punk. Like this was not 5 years ago where you are out of one company and you're shut out from a mainstream setting. I mean, there is always going to be forgiveness when you are a star that is perceived to be able to make a valuable difference. And there's no arguing that from the return, the response that it got, and what it's going to get in subsequent appearances as well, and how they can maintain that and keep it going. But it is, I did find it to be, worthwhile observation on your part as well. You can hear Kris every month on the NWA podcast with Nate Milton and Andrew Thompson. They are going to be back a week from Sunday, so you can check out their latest, as they will be breaking down, I am sure, the CM Punk return and whatever else is going on in the pro wrestling industry as they close out 2023. And I know you're a busy man, Kris. What else is going on? You've got a book in the works as well, and battling COVID as well.
Yeah, the COVID thing. I woke up in the morning feeling like a bunch of people like punched me in the stomach 1,000 times. But I'm working on this book, and that's still just kind of. I was hoping 2024. It's looking probably like 2025 now. What's going? I was hoping to be in Philly this year, or next year. I don't think that's going to happen because I have to go to Columbia at Bio Accelerator to get stem cell treatment. So I've got the
Rey Mysterio plan, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to be on the Rey Mysterio plan, man. He's like
Kevin Nash swear by this stuff.
Oh yeah, man. It costs $30,000, so it better work, man. I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's a lot of money, man. And
that's prime AEW household income right there.
Right. Yeah. And my wife is the one that kind of convinced me to do it. So, it's a lot, but yeah. So, my main focus right now on the wrestling side of things is just doing a good podcast for Post, and just once you've kind of have like certain health issues and all that, it starts putting life's ills in perspective. So I'm just happy to be part of the Post Network right now, and just once I get past this season of my life, the goals can be a little bit more lofty. I can kind of start thinking bigger, right?
Well, Kris, we always enjoy having you on to chat. We'll be checking out your next show, the NWA podcast, a must listen every month with Andrew, Nate, and Kris. And Andrew Thompson is going to be on with me later tonight for Rewind to Dynamite. So I'm getting almost the full NWA podcast experience today. Thanks as always, Kris, and we'll do this again sometime.
All right, cool. Thanks guys.
Kris.
Peace.
All right. That was Kris from LA, a man whose calls I was screening 20 years ago on the law. So yes, a loyal listener going years back, and now part of the Post Wrestlenomics network itself. But some great breakdowns there, Brandon. I found them to be really the wow factor was my biggest.
The wow factor.
Yeah, it was
the wow.
It was eye-opening. I was like, this is just the anomaly of all pro wrestling companies. We really should get Jeannie Buss on if she knows anything about WoW. Like, how hands-on do you think she is with this thing? Like, she's obviously a big pro wrestling fan, or at least through Dave McClain is
I think she funds it and she makes sure it's on TV. But I doubt she's very involved other than that. I hope you can't hear. There's a guy climbing a tree with a chainsaw and is sawing away at a tree that's like in somebody else's backyard or something. So hopefully
it's okay. It's decent ambience before we get on out of here. Which the last thing I want to talk about was just some of the numbers from the past couple of nights. We had a Collision on Saturday night, which was going against two college football games that I think did over 17 million viewers combined, and Collision at least got a bit of a bump up. And I would say in this time period for Collision, 453,000 viewers, 0.14. I think they're more than happy to take those numbers during football season and on a WWE free weekend.
The highest since October 28th in total viewership, the highest since October 21st in the demo. Granted, they've had some low numbers in that time, but this was a better number than they've done in the past. But it's in the 400s. I mean, you look at the earlier days of Collision, they were doing in the 500s. But this is it's just one of those weeks where it's like it had better be up after doing some of their lowest ratings yet for the show.
Yeah. So this Saturday they will go against Deadline, and then it's going to be the NFL for the remainder of December that will have Saturday night games that they will be contending against. So we will see what will have the bigger impact, NXT Deadline or an NFL game.
That's a good question. I mean, I think we all kind of felt like, well, NXT PLE is not going to hurt it as much as the main roster would. And it hurt it just as badly the last time. Mm-hmm. So I would guess maybe wrestling slightly more. But NFL competition is going to crush it too, I'm sure.
And Monday's episode of Raw, this was a somewhat of it was a come down from the week prior, but still their second largest numbers during football season this year. 1,533,000 viewers, 0.49 in the demo. This was going up against the Bengals and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And yes, the Jaguars prevailed over Raw, with the football game doing 16.5 million viewers. They also had a pair of the in-season tournament games from the NBA going on at the same time as well. So this was, and for a show that did not have CM Punk nor Randy Orton like the previous week.
Yes. Tony Khan beat Raw.
That's it. Headline City right there.
Yes. I mean, it was, if you look at it in terms of like what it did from the prior week, if I look at the charts here and look at, so here, for people watching a video here, this big spike here is the CM Punk return. It's slightly over what it was doing the week prior, but it's right back into the normal range. So it's not like, you can't look at this and tell yourself a narrative of like, oh, CM Punk is back, and that has helped them maintain viewers, although it did do a very good rating last week because of that and the post Survivor Series buzz and Randy Orton too.
So I was like calculating the numbers on Tuesday, and my reference,
in
of
your
course,
Microsoft Word. Is that what it was? Calculations?
Yes, I go like always to Brandon's viewership spreadsheet, and I'm putting in the numbers, and I'm like, whoa. I'm looking at this. How did it lose this much? I'm looking, I was about to message you. I was like, is this their lowest 18-49 ever? And I realized I put in the Collision number where it was the Raw number right across, and then had to fix my mistake. So nonetheless, not as bad as I had initially thought it was.
I learned on a recent Ask Away that it's one of your ambitions to learn how to do spreadsheets in Excel. So I'm standing by and ready to help you with that. At any time.
I do have people in my life that are experts. Between my wife and you, are brilliant at Excel, and I do not excel at Excel. So
you don't feel like you have like rudimentary skills at using Excel. It feels pretty intuitive, right? You're just doing math.
It's I do not. I am sure if I could learn all the formulas and such, it would be if someone showed me, I think I would get it. I could probably just punch up a tutorial and do pretty basics. Like I'm not exactly doing like algorithms here. It's like this hour plus this hour plus this hour divide by 3 is
like, you don't feel like you could add a couple of these cells together. All you got to do is like press equals, and then you start referencing other cells, and you have them get added together.
Yeah, I've just had the simplicity of Word for all this time. When if I ever write a will, I'm gonna leave Brandon my Word doc of ratings going back years and years and years.
I don't really want to know what that
shake
looks
his
like.
head and be like, what is he doing here? This is insane. So anyway, definite differences here. Brandon on the cutting edge with Excel. But there you go. So I would still say a fine number for Raw. That was obviously going to be down this week. And we'll see what the CM Punk effect is. It's tribute to the troops on Friday. Mm-hmm. We're getting a musical, some group playing. The War and the Treaty are playing. This is a husband and wife duo that are going to be performing on SmackDown. Cannot say I am familiar with the War and the Treaty.
Why?
It's tribute to the troops. So it is time to play music.
Be singing something patriotic? Is this remember Georgia Florida Line, their special appearance?
Oh, they have their favorite. Hardy is providing a song, not Prox with Jen Hardy, but rather Hardy. I don't know, it's some anti-political theme that they have.
An anti-political theme.
He said, I looked up these lyrics. I'm not talking about politics, and he just sings about small town values.
Wow.
But this is not politics he's talking about. So maybe CM Punk's going to have to introduce the War and the Treaty. We'll get to do the musical introduction.
Wait, and Hardy is going to be there too?
I don't know if he's going to be there, but they did note Hardy is one of the official themes of Tribute to the Troops.
I'm talking about the sun coming up and the sun coming down on a John Deere, turning up on a hard work check. I making that blue collar country boy's neck red. I'm talking about the color of them jerseys on a Friday night. At the end of another long, hot, dry summer, between the dust and the rust, the trucks are half covered in red. Those are some of the lyrics there.
Sounds like Dana White's playlist is seeping its way into WWE offerings. So that is we're thinking about Dana White. He's backing up Elon Musk. No sponsors are going to tell us what to do.
Is he endorsing Elon Musk explicitly?
Oh yeah. He's backing Elon Musk as well.
Well, there's an Ari Emanuel triangle there. So.
It's all the connections. Well, there you have it, everyone. You are now up to date on everything going on in the world of professional wrestling. Coming up this week, we have patreon.com/Wrestlenomics as Jesse, Kris, and Brandon will be live this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time, I'm sure, with no shortage of great topics to discuss. I hope you have a thorough review of Tribute to the Troops and whatever Hardy does and the latest in CM Punk news.
Yes. Jesse is out this weekend. I'm hoping to do which I've done some work on, an AEW revenue estimate, which I've done in years past. I'm sure the revenue will be up. I have a pretty good idea of the range that I'm in, but I should finalize that by Sunday, and we'll talk about that on the program.
All right. Look out for all of that. Again, I will be live tonight with Andrew Thompson on Rewind to Dynamite. Wei Ting is off on vacation this week, all the way in the Dominican Republic with a 1-year-old child. So let's all wish the best for Wei Ting on his first family adventure. And then Friday night, Rewind to SmackDown at postwrestlingcafe.com. Neil Flanagan will be with me on the show. We will chat about Tribute to the Troops and be taking your calls as well. So you can go check out all of that. And that's going to wrap up the show. So a big thank you to Kris Ealy for joining us, all of you for joining us live or downloading the show after the fact. For Brandon, I am John. Goodbye.